Did you ever think medieval nuns were secret power players? Were the women behind ancient abbey walls truly the architects of an entire continent's destiny? Prepare to uncover a forgotten history from roughly 500 to 1500 E. Number 7. Architects of knowledge and literature. For centuries, the quiet cloisters of Europe buzzed with a secret activity that shaped the very bedrock of intellectual life. Far from being isolated from the world of books and ideas, medieval nuns were at the heart of it, serving as diligent scribes, profound authors, and tireless preservers of knowledge. They were the custodians of vast libraries, the human printing presses of their age, and original thinkers whose words resonated far beyond their convent walls. The very act of reading and writing, especially for women, was a revolutionary power, and these nuns wielded it with extraordinary skill. Consider the meticulous work of the scribes. Within the scriptoria of convents, across kingdoms like Francia, England, and the Holy Roman Empire, nuns dedicated countless hours to copying manuscripts. This was not a passive activity. It required immense concentration, discipline, and a deep understanding of the texts. Armed with quills fashioned from goose feathers, vellum pages made from animal skin, and inks ground from natural pigments, they painstakingly reproduced religious texts like the Bible and liturgical books, but also secular works, classical Latin literature, and legal documents. Each stroke of the pen was a deliberate act of preservation, ensuring that knowledge, stories, and laws survived the tumultuous medieval period. Records from the Abbey of St. Gall, in modern-day Switzerland, for example, reveal an active scriptorium where nuns contributed significantly to the production of manuscripts. Their careful handwriting and attention to detail meant that these copies were often works of art in themselves, not just functional objects. The sheer volume of their work is astounding. A single copy of a large book could take months or even years to complete, yet they produced hundreds of them. This labor was fundamental to the spread of literacy and the continuity of intellectual traditions. Without their relentless efforts, many ancient texts that form the basis of modern Western thought might have been lost forever. Beyond copying, nuns were also prolific and influential authors in their own right. They composed theological treatises, wrote historical chronicles, penned biographies of saints known as hagiographies, crafted beautiful poetry, and even developed Nephites musical compositions. One of the most striking examples is Hrotsvit of Gandersheim, a canoness from Saxony in the 10th century. She wrote original Latin dramas, a radical departure from the purely religious plays of her time, modeling them after the Roman playwright Terence, but imbuing them with Christian themes. Her plays featured strong female protagonists, challenged conventional morality, and explored complex spiritual questions. Her work stands as a testament to her profound classical learning and her creative genius. Historians, studying the cultural landscape of the Ettonian Empire, note her unique contribution, seeing her as an intellectual giant of her era. Her writings were not merely entertainment, they were sophisticated literary creations that influenced later European dramatic traditions. Another towering figure in the realm of monastic authorship was Hildegard of Bingen in the 12th century. Though more widely known for her visions and musical compositions, her written works were extensive and deeply influential. Her theological and scientific writings, such as Scivias, a record of her divine visions, Physica, a study of natural science and botany, and Causae et Curae, a text on medicine and healing, were circulated widely throughout Europe. Letters from contemporaries show that emperors, popes, and kings sought her counsel and her interpretations of Scripture. Her unique blend of spiritual insight, scientific observation, and artistic expression made her an unprecedented voice in her time, shaping spiritual understanding and even early scientific thought. She developed her own language, lingua ignota, and its accompanying alphabet, showing an astonishing level of intellectual innovation. This was a woman who did not just consume knowledge. She created it on a grand scale, pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible for a woman in her time. Nuns also played a vital role in preserving classical learning during periods when such knowledge was scarce outside monastic centers. As the Roman Empire fragmented and libraries crumbled, convents became safe havens for ancient manuscripts. They carefully collected, cataloged, and protected these texts, ensuring that the wisdom of ancient Greece and Rome remained accessible. For instance, convents often held copies of works by Virgil, Ovid, Cicero, and other classical authors. These literary treasures were not merely stored away. They were studied, discussed, and taught within the convent schools. Continuity of classical scholarship owes a significant debt to the quiet dedication of these women. A letter from an abbess in the 9th century to a bishop requests certain classical texts, illustrating the active engagement of nuns with this ancient heritage. This preservation work was not just about holding on to the past, it was about providing the intellectual foundations for future generations of scholars and thinkers. Without the scriptoria and libraries of nunneries, much of what we know about the classical world would have been lost to history. They were the unsung heroes of intellectual continuity, painstakingly copying and preserving texts that formed the very basis of Western literature and philosophy, ensuring that the torch of knowledge continued to burn brightly, even through the darkest periods. Their legacy is etched into the very words we read and the ideas we ponder today. Number 6. Masters of art and melody. Beyond the silent stacks of books and the scratching of quills, medieval nunneries were vibrant centers of artistic creation, pulsating with color, intricate design, and soaring melodies. These women were not just passive recipients of culture. They were active producers, shaping the visual and auditory landscape of their world. From the delicate strokes of illuminated manuscripts to the grand scale of architectural design and the ethereal beauty of sacred music, nuns left an indelible mark on European art and culture. Their creative output demonstrates a sophistication and skill that rivals any male artist of the period. The world of illuminated manuscripts was one where nuns truly shone. These elaborate books, often religious texts, were not just copied. They were transformed into dazzling works of art through the addition of intricate illustrations, decorative borders, and gilded initials. Nuns worked with precious pigments derived from minerals and plants, using fine brushes to paint miniature scenes and intricate patterns. The vibrant blues of lapis lazuli and the radiant golds made from real gold leaf brought these pages to life. The Winchester School of Illumination, for example, saw significant contributions from nunneries in England, where specific stylistic elements can be traced to their artistic practices. A surviving 10th century psalter, likely crafted by nuns, shanks extraordinary detail in its depictions of biblical scenes and Celtic knotwork designs. This work was not just about beauty. It was a form of devotion, a way to glorify God through artistic excellence. The precision and patience required for such detailed work were immense. Yet nuns produced countless such masterpieces that are still admired in museums and libraries today. Each illuminated page was a testament to their artistic prowess and their deep spiritual commitment, visually enriching the reading experience and making sacred texts more accessible and awe-inspiring. Textile arts were another domain where nuns excelled, turning simple threads into luxurious and meaningful creations. Embroidery, weaving, and tapestry making were central to convent life. Nuns crafted elaborate vestments for priests, altar cloths for churches, and banners for processions. They used fine silks, wools, and linens, often incorporating gold and silver threads and precious jewels. The Bayeux Tapestry, a famous embroidered cloth depicting the Norman conquest, is believed by some historians to have been created or significantly contributed to by nuns at Wilton Abbey in England, known for its exceptional needlework. While definitive proof is debated, the sophistication of its design and the skill of its execution point to a highly organized and talented workshop, precisely the kind found within nunneries. These textile creations were not merely decorative. They were functional works of art that adorned sacred spaces and communicated religious narratives. They also represented significant economic value, serving as gifts to royalty and sources of income for the convents. The intricate stitches, the symbolic imagery, and the sheer scale of some of these works demonstrate an incredible mastery of material and technique. Music, too, flowed from the hearts and minds of medieval nuns. They were not just performers of existing chants, but also significant composers of new melodies and liturgical dramas. Hildegard of Bingen, mentioned previously for her writings, was a prolific and innovative composer. Collection of 77 liturgical songs. The Symphonia Armoniae Celestium Revelation. Shanks is a unique melodic style characterized by wide vocal ranges and expressive melodies that differ from traditional Gregorian chant. Her music was performed within her convent and influenced other monastic communities. Her liturgical drama, Ordo Virtutum, or Play of the Virtues, is considered the earliest morality play, featuring allegorical characters and an original score. This pioneering work combined music, drama, and theological instruction, providing a rich, spiritual, and artistic experience. The nuns within Hildegard's community meticulously copied her compositions, ensuring their preservation and dissemination. Creation and performance of sacred music within convents provided a profound spiritual outlet and contributed significantly to the development of early European musical traditions. Their voices, both literally and figuratively, enriched the soundscape of the medieval world. Finally, nuns sometimes played a direct role in architecture and urban planning, overseeing the construction and expansion of their convents. Abbesses were often responsible for managing large estates and significant wealth, allowing them to fund ambitious building projects. The design of convent churches, cloisters, refectories, and dormitories required a deep understanding of engineering, aesthetics, and practical needs. While master masons and architects would carry out the physical labor, the abbesses often provided the vision and directed the construction. For instance, the abbess of Quedlinburg oversaw the continued development and embellishment of her magnificent abbey church, a powerful symbol of her authority and patronage. The convent buildings were not just functional spaces. They were architectural statements embodying the power and piety of the monastic community. They often featured impressive Romanesque or Gothic elements, contributing to the architectural diversity of Europe. These buildings stand as enduring monuments to the artistic patronage and organizational skills of medieval nuns, demonstrating their ability to shape the physical environment and leave a lasting legacy of beauty and ingenuity. Number 5. Economic powerhouses and land barons. Popular image of medieval nuns often centers on spiritual contemplation and quiet devotion, but the reality was far more dynamic. Many convents were formidable economic enterprises, functioning as powerful landholders, agricultural innovators, and centers of production that profoundly influenced the economic landscape of medieval Europe. Abbesses in particular managed vast estates, controlled significant wealth, and engaged in sophisticated economic practices, demonstrating business acumen that would rival any merchant or lord of the period. Their economic activities were not merely self-sustaining. They generated surpluses, stimulated local economies, and provided vital resources for their communities and beyond. At the heart of a convent's economic power lay its landholdings. Through royal grants, noble donations, and shrewd acquisitions, many nunneries accumulated extensive estates that stretched over multiple villages and thousands of acres. The Abbess of Quedlinburg, for instance, governed a territory that was effectively a principality within the Holy Roman Empire, exercising feudal rights over numerous tenants and serfs. She collected rents, tithes, and taxes, and held judicial authority over her lands. This level of economic and political control meant that the abbess was a major regional player, influencing markets, labor, and settlement pattern. Her decisions on land use, crop rotation, and resource management had a direct impact on the lives of thousands of people. These abbesses were not just religious leaders. They were powerful feudal lords responsible for the welfare and productivity of their vast domains. Beyond merely collecting revenue, convents were also active centers of agricultural innovation. Nuns and their lay workers managed farms, forests, vineyards, and fisheries. They implemented advanced farming techniques, such as the three-field system, and invested in infrastructure like mills and irrigation systems. Cultivation of specific crops and the breeding of livestock were carefully managed to maximize yields. For example, some convents were renowned for their vineyards and produced high-quality wine that was sold locally and even exported. Others specialized in dairy farming, providing cheese and butter to nearby towns. Records from a convent in northern France showed detailed accounts of their agricultural output, including grain, wool, and livestock, which were traded in regional markets. This active engagement in agricultural production made nunneries vital suppliers of food and raw materials, contributing significantly to the regional economy and food security. Convents also became significant production centers for a wide range of goods. Beyond the illuminated manuscripts and textiles mentioned earlier, nuns produced items essential for daily life and trade. They brewed beer often for their own consumption but also for sale, making them early players in the beverage industry. They cultivated medicinal herbs and prepared remedies, contributing to health and pharmacology. Some convents were known for their specialized crafts, such as metalwork or wax production for candles. The output of these workshops was often of high quality, sought after by lay patrons and other monastic communities. For instance, a convent in Bavaria was famed for its fine linen, a product that brought substantial income and prestige. The skilled labor and organized production within these convent walls supported not only the community of nuns, but also numerous lay workers, apprentices, and merchants who facilitated the trade of these goods. Financial acumen was another surprising aspect of convent life. Abbates were not only managers of land and goods, but also shrewd financial operators. They engaged in lending sometimes to local lords or even royalty, acting as early forms of banks. They invested in new technologies, such as improved mills or presses. They also participated in complex trade networks, selling their surplus produce and manufactured goods in distant markets, and acquiring luxury items or essential materials that they could not produce themselves. Accounts from a convent in England reveal sophisticated financial transactions, including loans to the crown and investments in urban properties. This financial activity helped to circulate wealth, support trade routes, and provide capital for various ventures across Europe. The economic strength of these convents ensured their independence and influence, making them indispensable players in the medieval economy. Their ability to generate and manage wealth allowed them to be patrons of the arts, benefactors of the poor, and powerful forces in the secular world. Number 4. Pioneers of care and compassion. While their economic prowess was formidable, medieval nuns also forged a legacy of profound compassion and practical care, establishing institutions that served as lifelines for the sick, the poor, and the vulnerable across Europe. Far from being isolated from the suffering of the world, convents were often at the forefront of social welfare, functioning as medieval hospitals, orphanages, and centers for charitable relief. Their commitment to Christian charity translated into tangible life-saving services that filled crucial gaps in societal support, demonstrating an enduring impact on public health and social responsibility. One of the most vital contributions of nuns was their role in healthcare. Many convents maintained infirmaries, which functioned as early hospitals, providing medical care not only for the nuns themselves, but also for the surrounding lay community. These infirmaries were often staffed by nuns with knowledge of herbal medicine, nursing, and basic surgical procedures. They cultivated medicinal gardens, carefully documenting the properties of various plants and developing complex remedies for a wide range of ailments. Hildegard of Bingen, for example, compiled extensive texts on natural medicine and holistic healing, detailing remedies for everything from fevers to fractures, and her community actively practiced these methods. Records from convents reveal their systematic approach to patient care, including the provision of clean bedding, nourishing food, and compassionate attention. These monastic infirmaries were often the only places where organized medical care was available, especially in rural areas, making them indispensable to public health. They treated pilgrims, the poor, and anyone who came seeking solace and healing, embodying a profound commitment to physical well-being. Beyond direct medical care, convents were central to providing for the poor and marginalized. Many nunneries operated almonries, where they distributed food, clothing, and sometimes even shelter to the needy. The abbesses often held a moral and practical obligation to care for the poor within their territories, fulfilling this duty with a mix of generosity and systematic organization. During times of famine or plague, these convents often became sanctuaries, offering refuge and sustenance when other institutions failed. The extensive land holdings and productive capacity of many nunneries allowed them to generate significant surpluses, which they then redistributed to those in need. Chroniclers often praised the generosity of particular abbesses, detailing how they opened their doors and their larders to the suffering populace. This charitable work was not merely an occasional act. It was a continuous, institutionalized effort that supported the most vulnerable members of society. Mitigating widespread suffering, orphanages and foundling homes were also established and managed by nuns. When parents could not care for their children or when children were abandoned, convents often stepped in, providing a safe haven, food, and basic education. These children, especially girls, were often raised within the convent walls, learning literacy, crafts, and religious instruction. This care for orphaned and vulnerable children was a crucial social service, preventing them from falling into destitution or exploitation. Letters from patrons sometimes indicate their gratitude for the nuns taking in a child, highlighting the importance of this work. The nuns provided a stable and nurturing environment, ensuring that these children had a chance at a better life than they would have otherwise. This commitment to the youngest and most helpless members of society, the profound social responsibility embraced by these monastic communities. Furthermore, nuns often provided hospitality to travelers, pilgrims, and scholars. Their guest houses offered safe lodging, food, and rest to those journeying across Europe. This hospitality was particularly vital in an era when travel was dangerous and inns were scarce and often unsavory. Providing a secure and welcoming stop for travelers was a form of service that facilitated commerce, pilgrimage, and intellectual exchange. Abbedesses sometimes hosted royalty and high-ranking officials, using these occasions to foster diplomatic ties or secure further patronage for their communities. The reputation for hospitality at certain nunneries spread far and wide, making them known as havens of peace and comfort for all who sought them. This broad spectrum of care, from healing the sick and feeding the hungry to sheltering orphans and welcoming travelers, demonstrates the deep and pervasive impact medieval nuns had on the social fabric of Europe, acting as an indispensable network of charity and human kindness. Number 3. Teachers and scholars of the realm. Long before widespread public education, medieval convents served as vital centers of learning, quietly shaping the minds of generations of European women, and sometimes even men. These nunneries functioned as elite schools, offering a comprehensive education that went far beyond basic religious instruction. They were places where literacy flourished, where classical texts were studied, and where intellectual pursuits were not only tolerated but actively encouraged. The educational legacy of medieval nuns established a foundation for female intellectualism and literacy that would prove crucial for later periods. Within the convent walls, young girls, often from noble families, received an education that was often superior to what was available to most boys in the secular world. Curriculum was rigorous and broad, encompassing not only religious studies like theology and scripture, but also a wide range of secular subjects. Latin was a core component, enabling students to read classical texts, participate in scholarly discussions, and understand the liturgy. They learned to read, write, and understand complex grammatical structures. Beyond Latin, many nuns taught arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and rhetoric. Presence of extensive libraries within convents, filled with both sacred and classical texts, provided unparalleled resources for learning. The very act of copying manuscripts, as mentioned earlier, was itself a form of advanced literary training, honing skills in language, orthography, and presentation. Music was another integral part of the convent education. Nuns were trained in chant, plainsong, and the theory of music. They learned to sing complex liturgical pieces and sometimes to compose their own. This musical education often included instruction in playing instruments, though vocal music remained paramount. The ability to perform and understand music was seen as both a spiritual discipline and a highly valued cultural skill. The musical achievements of figures like Hildegard of Bingen illustrate the high level of musical education and innovation present within these institutions. These skills were not just for internal use. Many noble women who received their education in convents returned to secular life with a cultivated appreciation for music and often became patrons of the arts themselves. The education provided in nunneries was not solely academic. It also included practical skills like needlework, household management, and sometimes even basic medical knowledge. These skills prepared the girls for various roles in life, whether they chose to remain in the convent or return to their families. For those who stayed, the convent offered a path to intellectual and administrative leadership. For those who left, they carried with them a profound education that often set them apart from their peers. Queens and noblewomen who had been educated in convents were frequently noted for their intelligence, administrative abilities, and spiritual depth. For example, chronicles record that Empress Adelheid, wife of Otto I, received her education in a convent, and her subsequent reign was marked by notable intellectual and political prowess. While primarily focused on girls, some convents also educated boys, especially those destined for the clergy or from noble families seeking a strong intellectual foundation for their sons. These boys would receive similar instruction in Latin, scripture, and general knowledge before moving on to other schools or universities. This demonstrates the broad educational impact of these institutions, extending beyond the female sphere. Teachers themselves, the nuns, were highly educated women, serving as living examples of scholarship and intellectual pursuit. They were the custodians of knowledge, transmitting it from one generation to the next, not just within their cloistered communities, but also to the wider world through their former students. The intellectual rigor and the breadth of the curriculum offered in these convent schools were remarkable, providing a powerful counter-narrative to the idea that the medieval period was a time of widespread illiteracy and ignorance, especially for women. The intellectual foundations laid by these teaching nuns profoundly shaped the cultural and intellectual landscape of Europe. Number 2. Voices of God and mystical insight. In a world deeply entwined with faith, medieval nuns emerged as powerful spiritual authorities, their profound mystical experiences and prophetic visions granting them immense influence over both lay people and powerful rulers. They were not merely practitioners of piety, they were conduits for divine communication, spiritual guides whose insights were sought by emperors, popes, and common folk alike. This spiritual authority elevated them to positions of unparalleled respect and power, shaping theological thought, influencing religious practices, and even directing political decisions across Europe. Their personal experiences of the divine were often treated as direct revelations, lending their voices an undeniable weight. Hildegard of Bingen stands as the quintessential example of a mystical nun whose visions captivated and influenced her age. Beginning in childhood, Hildegard reported receiving profound spiritual visions, which she meticulously documented and interpreted in her major theological work, Scythias, meaning "know the ways." These visions were not seen as mere personal experiences, but as divine pronouncements meant for the entire Christian world. She bravely shared these visions, even sending letters to popes, emperors, and other religious leaders, admonishing them for their failings and guiding them toward righteous paths. For instance, she wrote directly to Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, criticizing his actions against the Church, and her words carried significant weight due to her perceived divine connection. Her theological insights were revolutionary, for her time encompassing cosmic unity, ecological awareness, and the feminine aspects of the divine. Her visions and writings shaped spiritual understanding and offered a unique perspective on the nature of God and humanity. Another powerful figure was Bridget of Sweden, a noblewoman who, after her husband's death, founded the Brigittine order and became one of the most influential mystics of the 14th century. Her extensive revelations described detailed visions of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and various saints, often including explicit political and religious messages. Popes and kings sought her advice, and she traveled widely, even to Rome, to deliver her divine messages. For example, she urged Pope Urban V to return the papacy from Avignon to Rome, a significant political and religious move. Her revelations also strongly influenced devotional practices, particularly the veneration of the Virgin Mary and the Passion of Christ. The Brigittine order she founded spread rapidly across Europe, testament to the powerful resonance of her spiritual insights and the influence of her visions. Her authority was not based on traditional ecclesiastical hierarchy, but on the direct authority believed to come from God himself. Julian of Norwich, an English anchoress from the 14th century, offers another profound example. Living in solitary confinement attached to a church, she experienced a series of intense visions during a severe illness. She then spent decades meditating upon and writing about these showings of divine love, which are considered the first book in the English language written by a woman. Her theological insights, particularly her emphasis on God's maternal love and the goodness of creation, were remarkably optimistic and compassionate for a period often marked by fear and harsh theological pronouncements. While she did not travel or directly advise rulers as some others did, her spiritual wisdom attracted many visitors seeking her counsel and spiritual direction. Her words shaped the spiritual landscape of England and continue to inspire seekers of mystical truth today. These mystics were not isolated figures. They were part of a broader network of spiritual women whose visions and prophecies were taken seriously at all levels of society. Their direct access to what was believed to be divine truth allowed them to critique societal ills, challenge established powers, and offer guidance that transcended human limitations. They were not just interpreting Scripture. They were adding to it through their direct experiences, creating a living, breathing theology that resonated deeply with the spiritual aspirations of medieval people. Their voices, infused with divine authority, reshaped religious discourse, inspired new forms of piety, and held significant sway over the hearts and minds of a deeply devout population. Number 1. Unseen hands of political power. Behind the tranquil facade of cloister walls, medieval nuns, particularly abbesses, often wielded an astonishing degree of political power, extending their influence far beyond spiritual matters. They were not just passive figures of piety. They were astute administrators, formidable landowners, and sometimes even de facto rulers who navigated complex political landscapes. Their ability to protect their communities, negotiate with kings and emperors, and exercise feudal rights meant they were indispensable players in the political machinery of medieval Europe, subtly but powerfully shaping the destinies of regions and even nations. The most striking examples of political power come from the princely abbesses of the Holy Roman Empire. The Abbess of Quedlinburg, for instance, held the status of an imperial immediacy, meaning she answered directly to the Holy Roman Emperor, not to any intermediate lord. She ruled a substantial territory, issued her own laws, held her own courts, minted coins, and commanded her own army. She participated in imperial diets, a kind of parliament, and her political influence was on par with that of powerful bishops and princes. She was not merely advising rulers, she was a ruler herself, responsible for the governance and defense of her principality. Chronicles of the time note the diplomatic skills of these abbesses, who balanced alliances and rivalries to maintain their autonomy and protect their vast estates. This direct exercise of sovereign power by a woman was a unique and enduring feature of medieval Europe, demonstrating a remarkable acceptance of female leadership in the political sphere, provided it was sanctioned by ecclesiastical authority. Beyond these rare princely titles, many other abbesses held significant feudal rights and jurisdictions over their lands and the people living on them. They were landlords to knights, peasants, and merchants. They collected rents, administered justice, and oversaw infrastructure, projects like roads and bridges. The Abbess of Gandersheim, for example, controlled vast agricultural holdings and strategic trade routes, giving her considerable leverage in regional politics. She would have negotiated with local lords over boundaries, resources, and military protection, making her an active participant in the feudal system. The economic power of their convents directly translated into political influence, as their wealth could be used to support allies, pay for defense, or influence local elections. Their capacity to manage large estates and complex legal systems required exceptional administrative talent and political acumen. Nuns also played crucial roles as advisors and confidants to queens and other powerful women. Many noble women received their education in convents and maintained close ties with the abbesses and nuns who had shaped their youth. These relationships often extended into adulthood, with former students seeking spiritual guidance and political counsel from their former teachers. A queen, for instance, might rely on the discreet advice of an abbess, knowing her to be learned, pious, and well-connected. Such informal networks of influence were powerful, allowing nuns to shape policies, promote peace, or advocate for specific causes without holding formal political office. Letters from the time show numerous instances of queens seeking the wisdom of abbesses on matters of state and personal morality. Finally, abbesses often acted as protectors and advocates for their communities during times of war, famine, or political upheaval. They negotiated with invading armies, appealed to kings for protection, and mediated disputes between warring factions. Their spiritual authority often granted them a degree of neutrality or sanctity that allowed them to move through conflicts relatively unharmed and to act as peacemakers. For example, during times of siege, an abbess might negotiate terms of surrender or offer sanctuary to refugees, thereby safeguarding lives and property. Their unwavering commitment to their communities and their moral authority often made them the last line of defense against chaos. The unseen hands of these powerful women, guiding, ruling, and protecting, were undeniably a potent force in the political landscape of medieval Europe, leaving an indelible mark on its history.